Hi, and welcome to this video, America Becomes a World Power, Imperialism. And in this video, we're going to discuss the definition and examples of imperialism to include traditional foreign policy, definition of imperialism, reasons and rationalizations for imperialism. So as you can see from this map of imperialism in the 19th and early 20th centuries, most of the world was essentially colonized by countries such as Belgium, Denmark, England, France, and Germany. And it's because of this that the United States is going to eventually become an imperialist country or power itself. But before we look at that, let's take a look at some of the traditional United States foreign policy issues. So America traditionally has had a foreign policy of isolationism. And according to George Washington, first president of the United States, he said, quote, "It is our true policy to steer clear of permanent alliances with any portion of the free world." So basically what that meant is that the United States would essentially stay within its own borders, and it would really only care about what was going on in the United States and not become entangled into problems in Europe and elsewhere. Most of the 19th century was spent exploring and settling the western frontiers, as we had discussed in previous videos. However, this is going to change the perception of American boundaries, particularly when America finally settles the frontier in the 1890s. And as you may recall, Manifest Destiny is going to extend beyond the borders of the United States, not stopping at the coasts of California, but will continue on into the Pacific and into other parts of the world. So the definition of imperialism is essentially the policy of extending a nation's authority by territorial acquisition or by the establishment of economic and political hegemony over other nations. Some of the reasons and rationalizations for imperialism include to gain more power in the international arena by following the European example, like the map I showed you at the beginning of this presentation, missionary zeal, and the desire upon the United States to gain more wealth. So let's talk a little bit about prestige, racial theories, and economic growth. These and other factors are going to increase America's interest in overseas expansion. And as I mentioned earlier, we are going to look to our former colonial master, Great Britain, who at this point in time had become a major world imperialist power. There's an old expression that says that the sun never sets on the English Empire, and basically what that means is that England had colonies, as you can tell from this cartoon, if you will, all over the world. And as we had discussed earlier, the notion of social Darwinism is going to play a role. So social Darwinism, just as a refresher, is based upon the ideas of Charles Darwin's theory of evolution and the idea of survival of the fittest. But what happens with social Darwinism is they apply these to society and to politics. The wealthy are the strong, and therefore they have the right to rule the poor, who are weak. And the United States, as a strong nation, must dominate the weaker nations. And this idea was put forth by a gentleman named Herbert Spencer. Probably the most specific example of social Darwinistic thinking comes to us from the writings of Rudyard Kipling, who was an English poet, among other things, and he wrote a poem called The White Man's Burden. Here are two political cartoons portraying the white man's burden. Admiral Dewey, who is the hero of the Spanish-American War, washes his hands in the commercial exploitation of the white man's burden, according to this advertisement. So there is the underlying idea that the United States became an imperialist power to gain more wealth. so the United States needed new markets to export the surplus of products from its farms and factories. So I had mentioned in previous lectures that American ingenuity and inventiveness had created all kinds of new innovations that are going to increase productivity, not only in the factories but also in the farms. And as a result, American factories and farms are able to produce huge quantities of material. However, there's only so many dollars in the average American's pocketbook, and they can only buy so many items or products. So what happens is that industrialists begin to look beyond the borders of the United States for new markets, and that's basically what is going to spur the economic design for new marketplaces. And you can see this, the total imports and exports by year. So beginning in the 1870s, we're going to export about $350 million worth of items. However, by 1914, that number is going to increase to $2.8 billion. Also, our number of imports are also increasing at the same time. Let's take a look at the writings of a senator named Alfred Beveridge from 1898. And he said, "Today we are raising more than we can consume. Today we are making more than we can use. Therefore, we must find new markets for our produce, new occupation for our capital, new work for our labor. As our commerce spreads, the flag of liberty will circle the globe and the highway of the ocean, carrying trade to all mankind. We'll be guarded by the guns of the Republic, and as their thunders salute the flag, benighted, ignorant people will know that the voice of liberty is speaking at last for them, that civilization is dawning at last for them." So what Senator Beveridge is doing here is he's linking American capitalism and imperialistic fervor with this notion of social Darwinism and essentially the American businesses spreading throughout the world, backed up by its military power, and in the process it will serve as a civilizing effect on the world's people. And this couldn't have happened without the significant contributions of a author named Thayer Mahan. And basically, Mahan wrote a book called The Influence of Sea Power Upon History, 1660 to 1783. And basically, his thesis of the book is that great nations were always seafaring nations with powerful navies. From this, he reasoned that the U.S. needed to acquire colonies around the world to serve and protect their merchant marine fleet. Also, they served as coaling stations. You have to remember, at the time period, ships basically were powered by coal, and the ships would need, of course, fresh water to boil, as well as coal to heat up the boilers. And they would be limited by how far they could go based upon access to those raw materials. And so Mahan's theory, or thesis, was basically to set up colonies throughout the world that would give us access to markets, particularly those in Asia. Okay, that concludes this video, and thanks for watching.